How's it going, everybody? I think we're having some technical difficulties. Let's see if we can get Martin back going. Just give us 1 second.
There I am.
Okie dokie. Yeah, we're back.
We're live, finally.
We are live.
We're live. We're technically deficient tonight with Kansas internet performing as wonderful as it usually does. And we have a special episode tonight. As you see by the title, Live Drive with 25. So I'm going to bring on our fearless leader, and he can explain to you what 25 means. So, Chris, can you get us?
Woo, baby.
Oh, yeah. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Oh, we got you. We got you. I was just explaining for you to let everybody know what Live Drive with 25 means. And I see some fancy looking seats here. So if your internet holds out, maybe you can explain to us what 25 EV you bought.
Yeah, we'll see how well my connection holds. The freeway on my I-40 on the way to Arkansas. So we'll see how good the internet is out here. But yeah, I am in the 25 Platinum. So after some peer pressure from Jace and Sergio and some others that are of the Platinum persuasion, I decided to go full bougie. And here I am, hands-free for the first time with Blue Cruise.
I know that so much, and I keep forgetting it. I still just forget that you didn't have Blue Cruise and Pack. That's a whole thing. I mean, you are really jumping up, man.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And those massaging seats. I know you're not uncomfortable.
No, you got this massaging, like 6 different ways to have massaging seats. Extended range battery,
sensing
of course.
wipers.
Rain sensing wipers. Yeah, all these phenomenal things that I was missing out on. That
heated rear seats in the second row. I mean, there's a couple power steering wheel. There's a couple like little luxuries you're gonna gain.
Yeah. The steering wheel is fully powered before it was manually adjusted. So yeah, now I get to spoil the kids with an awesome sunroof that I didn't used to have, so they can see that.
Man, and you had the most stripped down Lariat in the country. You had to have.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was only really Lariat because it had the leather, and that was really it.
And at the time, the bigger display, you jumped up to the 15 display, because the Flash didn't exist. But
so basically, I mean, if they made a Flash in 22, you had it with leather and a big screen.
Mine is Blue Cruise and mine though, but yeah.
Yeah, so arguably worse, you know what I mean? And it's got it's got the rear tail light bar, and it's got the sliding rear window, folding mirrors, which for me I actually do appreciate because California parking spots are notoriously narrow. So having those.
Are you still parking on the street every night? Is that your plan?
Still park on the street. Yep.
Okay. Yep. So those are good.
The wife gets the garage. I couldn't fit this truck in the garage because of other stuff. We got like a refrigerator in there and stuff. So.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So that's it's funny because the Lariat. I've had 2 Lariats now, and I have everything that you just said, with the exception of the massaging seats. So all that stuff, even the heated rear. And I think Lariat option levels are going to vary, but the 22 and 23, at least in the extended range, this truck I've got now is fully loaded except for Max Tow, and the last one had it. So I think the 22s felt like they were more loaded, which surprises me with your 22 Lariat, even though it was a standard range that was as stripped down as it was.
Yeah, no Max Tow, none of that stuff was on it. And, each year, progressively, things started dropping off the list, and even as I was trying to look into trucks to buy, as I would look at 24s, and I might see a price that I thought was enticing, I'd look at it and it wouldn't have Pro Power, and that was just a deal breaker for me. Well, it would have Pro Power, but not the 9.6. And so to me, if 2.4 just isn't going to get the job done,
No, you got to be able to run a welder anytime you want.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny. I think to some people that won't matter one bit, you know, and then to some people like us who have invested money to put in a transfer switch, it's a deal breaker, you know. So it's really sort of that you know, juxtaposition of that is fascinating. That for someone it could literally be like the reason why for you and for myself too, why we jumped up to platinum.
And on your trip, stopping at my house, I'll show you how I set mine up. And one of your next stop is going to be see Ben out in Colorado, and that's a key for him. He has to have that. He's off grid.
Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, I think that's an interesting.
I think, you know, speaking about the Lariat and.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I think speaking about the Lariat, especially the ones that were like the 22s and the 23s, but even the newer ones. It's I wouldn't have gone with the platinum personally unless the deal was so good that it just didn't make sense not to, because it's just as comfortable, you know, even though it's got the massaging seats and everything. It feels exactly like my other truck felt. It's just
still an
quiet,
F-150.
it's just as smooth. It's still an F-150 Lightning. It feels great. You know, it's got the extra range. That's awesome. I really appreciate that. It's got the little bells and whistles. It's got the power deployable running boards, which I'm liking more than I thought they would.
Yeah, we feel exactly the same.
But I don't need any of that stuff. And as cool as it's going to be, and you know, we are going to enjoy the sunroof. My wife is going to definitely enjoy the massaging seats. You know, all that stuff is going to have a benefit to it. But at the end of the day, I would have paid full price for a platinum. What the cost difference between the two, to Martin's point, I mean, you get most of this stuff in a Lariat, and it was just I wasn't finding great deals on Lariats, and I would look at the price, and by the time, you know, this one has the spare tire, which I value, and came with the 22 and 23, but not, was it the 24 or 25 that removed it, Jace, the spare tire?
The 25 technically is now when it's officially
that's easy to remedy. I mean, the jack mount's still there. That's easy. Some of that stuff like Pro Power, though, is extremely difficult to add back in. It can be done.
Yeah.
I know there's some hardware and some software you have to do, but it's not easy. It's not like taking a spare tire and throwing it under the truck.
And for people listening, there's kind of a difference where the way Ford does it is, you know, they have dealer options that are dealer installed, and then they kind of have options that you can get from the factory. They're kind of seemingly moving away from options from the factory and sort of moving towards mostly dealer installed stuff. There's like pros and cons to that.
That's not a dealer installed.
Correct. Yeah,
you know, it'd be
that's separate.
That's out ForScan and kind of doing it on your own, Google searching, trying to figure that out.
Yep, definitely. But as far as like Securico, there's a couple things that have kind of shifted. But you know, at least they're allowing, for the most part, most things to be optionable back. I know there's a couple, like work surface is not able to be added back to a Flash, which is, you know, unfortunate that the work trim kind of, you know, lost that.
Well, you technically can.
Right.
It's just not a dealer installed option. So
correct.
If you were to take, and Chris, I don't know if you guys have any of you guys have thought about this. There's a lot of guys that are starting to put I think it's the Escape or the Expedition knob for the shifter in place of the manual
shifter. Expedition,
I think there's one that the guys really like better than the other. There's a couple of them that have I need to call them because I've been thinking about doing mine. It's odd enough. I like holding my hand on that big manual shifter.
Me too.
There's just something about grabbing a hold of that makes me feel like I'm driving a truck. But to fold that work surface out, if you were wanting to use that often, that knob recessed down in the cup holder would be nice. And I know there's a few guys that have been very frustrated with the shifter problems that they've had over the last. It's been a little while, but that's not just Lightning. That's all F-150.
Yeah.
You know, and that knob would eliminate. Unfortunately, a digital knob would eliminate that because they're all digitally driven now. The shifter and the. You know, and the.
If
knob.
You were somebody that was using that often, I could definitely agree. You know, and every time you're folding that thing, it's a risk. So I definitely think that if you were using that often, I totally agree. We actually just installed chargers in the front that I posted about them on Twitter. I really, really like them. They're MagSafe, and they do block the shifter from ever being able to fold down, unfortunately, but it's a perfect spot. It still has enough room to be a fry holder. So, it charged my phone super quick. It's kind of like bang, bang, bang. And to be honest, we just don't really use the work surface that much. If I'm meeting, I'm kind of driving, and you can't use the work surface, well, I guess you could technically if you had the knob, but I mean, that's tricky business.
I mean, it's kind of like some other tricky stuff that we mentioned here that you couldn't do either. So,
yeah, I wouldn't recommend it, but you could do it. You could do it.
I will say that the nice thing about that little cup holder, and I want everybody, if you're listening and you use this for your French fries, please comment, because that is my favorite feature about the center console, sticking those fries in that console as I'm driving.
Honestly, the new one kind of with the phone charger, it kind of holds it a little tighter too. So it's like a small, medium, large. I mean, I could now fit a little variety of sizes a little bit easier.
Yeah.
So a little tighter, so to speak.
Hey, Steven from One Pedal. Chris, I know you're not watching this, but he's saying congrats. Hope you have a safe travels back home. And then you're gonna Joel Spencer. See you soon, Chris. So you'll be able to see him evidently before long. Is that on one of your stops? We're gonna hear.
Yeah. He's about 15 minutes away from Franklin charging. So we're gonna meet up there at 8:15 Central here. So about 45 minutes from now, I'm gonna pull in there and I'll flip the camera around and put it on mute just in the background, I guess. So while we're getting the thing charged up, and it'll just be one of the great things about this is, I've never gotten to meet Joel. I've never gotten to meet you. I've never gotten to meet Ben Westby. So being able to see these cool places and meet these incredible people that are just part of the community, being able to go to a place like Franklin. I'm also going to hit up an Ionity station in Kansas as I'm heading from your place, Martin, to Colorado.
Out Abilene or Hayes, I think it is.
Being able to kind of so to be able to experience those things, I just think is it's a super cool thing, and it's a part of life that I think I'll use one of my favorite quotes from Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and it's life moves pretty fast, and if you don't stop and look around once in a while, you can miss it. And that's one of my favorite things about an EV is that sometimes it forces you to stop and look around, and sometimes things like this you intentionally do. And you can really miss out on a lot of the world if you don't take the time to appreciate it. And so,
boy,
I'm not an old man yet, but yeah, I want to meet these incredible people. I want to see these incredible places. I don't have an Ionity out in California. I don't have Ford chargers like I've had at the dealer in Cleveland, Ohio, Cleveland, Tennessee. I don't have
wish,
that.
dang it.
When I first saw it, Jace, I thought, oh man, I'm going to go out and see Jace. And there's different Cleveland. Apparently there are more than one Cleveland. So
right.
It's funny you mentioned that, Chris, because
like I'm driving
early on when we had early on, and you guys were all early adopters too. So it's not so much now, but I looked forward to pulling into either a charging station, number one, or just random places and talking to people. I noticed early that I spent every charging stop talking to the other owners, whether it was a Lightning or something else. And it's not so much now. And then when I started pulling into the Tesla stations, it's like everybody stays in their car and nobody talks to each other. And I'm like, what happened? I thought this was life, that while you're charging, you get out and visit. And it didn't seem to be that way, but I kind of miss it. I'd like for us to visit a little more at chargers. I'm a social guy, but I like to keep to myself as well. But when it comes to talking about Lightnings, man, we can nerd out all day long.
Yeah, I think the other part is just seeing the different parts. I don't know if this thing is going to swing around. You'll have to let me know. Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
You got these big green trees on each side. You got this big median in the middle. I went across this amazing bridge out in Tennessee that went across this giant lake. It just looked amazing. And then the entry from Tennessee, I wish I had my camera on, going from Tennessee into Arkansas. Again,
you went over the bridge over the Mississippi?
Is that what that was? Was that the Mississippi
River?
Yeah,
the Mississippi River, man. Did you probably came by the Bass Pro and the Pyramid?
I did. I went by, yes, I sure did.
That was, if you'd have had the time, if we're on a road trip together sometime, we're stopping, because I went in there. It is an amazing building. They bought that. And so if anybody's ever been there, that thing is like 10 stories tall, and there's an observation deck you can go out on. Anyway, yeah, the Mississippi River, that bridge there's 2 or 3 of them there, and they're fantastic. Not probably as good as your Golden Gate back home, but still cool.
Every bit, you know what I mean? It's easy to take the Golden Gate or the Bay Bridge for granted. I'd argue that it wasn't any less beautiful to go over the Mississippi. And so yeah, it's been just quite a cool experience to see other parts that aren't just urban sprawl, for hours at a time. It's just nice to see a different drive and a different set of folks.
Yep. So tell us a little bit about the things that you've noticed. I know I did a little mapping before we got on, and it looks like your trip is almost, if not 2,500 miles, what you're doing coming home. So you're going to break this truck in correct on this trip.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a long trip, and it's one of those things where I don't get opportunities like this very often, so I really wanted to maximize it and get to see as many places and people as I reasonably could. And so I'd like to spend even more time at more places, but it just wasn't realistic.
Yeah.
So yeah, I started
You're
off,
like
by
4
flying.
days right now. Is that right? Roughly?
Yeah. I'll be lucky if I can get in 4. I'm not sure if I'm going to pull it off. Actually, I might have to go with an extra day. So yeah, we'll see. But yeah, it took me all day to fly from San Francisco out to Chattanooga, and then took an Uber from Chattanooga to Cleveland, Tennessee, and then that was 2 a.m. before I got there last night. It was last night, right? I don't even know.
I saw your post about the hotel and the airport in Chattanooga.
This morning.
It looked like it was just barren at the airport.
Yeah, there was nobody there. The flight out of Charlotte got delayed, and the incoming flight got delayed by weather. And then there was nobody to work the gate, I guess, to do the bridge to get the plane offloaded. And then they got somebody finally to do that, and then it was just one cascading problem. Then we got out onto the taxiway, and they had shut down one of the 2 main runways for I don't know what reason. We had missed our window to get onto the runway, and so that further delayed it. And then so it was by the time I got there to Chattanooga, there was nobody in that airport. It was pretty desolate. So so then I went over to no, go ahead.
You got the truck at the next morning then, right? Was that an easy process, or did it take some time?
Man, I wish it was easier, I guess, than it could have been, but harder than it should have been. And I think many people can relate to that when it comes to buying with Legacy Auto. I had already sent a cashier's check via FedEx in advance. And then the person who I sent it to was off that day, so they were asking me for tracking numbers. Finally, somebody called the guy, they told him where the check was. I asked if there was anything I could do ahead of time as far as paperwork. I provided my insurance, my driver's license, but there was no real DocuSign or process or way to do any of that ahead of time. So, I get there, and of course there's always the song and dance about all the different, dozens of things that a dealer is trying to sell you. And look, that's their job. I appreciate it. I get it. The guy was super nice. I told him, hey, look, I got 15 hours of driving ahead of me. I can use every hour I can get. And I don't want to, I know it's your job, but I'm just going to tell you no to everything, just so you know. And so he was really cool, and he got all the paperwork together. Then when they got the paperwork, somebody had printed some of it in advance. So some of it had the wrong date on there. So he had to reprint it. So it was about a 2.5 hour process to do the paperwork, whereas you can go in and get a Tesla in 30 minutes. Yeah.
So it's the days of if you were rich, and the days of walking in with $70,000 cash, plopping it down, and them handing you the keys, those don't exist anymore with legacy automakers, I don't believe.
No,
I'll tell you, it took 30. We took to sign the paperwork. It took 35 to 40 minutes for us. But again, that was they had it all down. It was DocuSign. They had an iPad. It was
that's the difference in dealers, or do you think that's just the difference in lease versus
totally a difference in dealer, unfortunately, because we just did Justin's 2 weeks later, and it was a nightmare. It wasn't 2.5 hours, but it was an hour probably and a half, and it just didn't need to be. It could have been.
And we're talking about you, Justin, and Chris's truck, where you guys already had it picked out. You didn't need to test drive and decide and all that. You didn't need to haggle. You knew what you were going in for.
I will say, Justin bought his that day, so his was a little bit different than mine. He got it, boom. Mine, but that's why I sent you my dealer, Chris Levi. I didn't send you the second one. I say the first one for a reason because The first one was amazing. We had everything done via text before I even saw the truck. He sent me quotes without asking me for credit score. It was just like everything was done. There was no questions were needed. He was sending me quotes, right away. So it's just a shame that, you can't find that consistent, experience across the board,
I got to tell you, and a little bit of that experience that you guys have is something that I despise. I can't handle going to dealers. Ever since I started building trucks at 14, I buy from the auction or somebody who has wrecked them personally. And I prefer that. When I pull into a Copart or an IAA and I see all these forklifts going every which way and all these trucks, I feel like I'm in my Graceland. This is home for me, is to see all these wrecked vehicles moving around. They put it on. I get that feeling, that new car feeling at the wrecked yard, like you guys do at the Ford dealer. It's not that I probably wouldn't get it at the Ford dealer, but I hate that experience of the pushiness, and you feel like a number. You're being herded as a cow, to me. And it's just my opinion, but I don't like that. I want to feel like I mean something. And I've only ever had that at a dealer one time. We bought a car from Jackie Cooper Infinity, and I think they were also a Mercedes or something out of Tulsa one time. And the guy there was about as old as Santa Claus and kind of looked like him. And I tell you, he would sit back and just put his feet up and answer questions, and there was no pushiness whatsoever. I couldn't believe the experience. And he was still on commission. Normally, you don't get that if it's not a commission-based, unless they're non-commission, you don't get that experience. But I've been to so many of them that they're like on a golf cart, shoving a business card through the window in the parking lot before you even get in the parking lot very, very far. And I can't handle it. I'd much rather just sit back, let me kind of look around and be there to answer some questions. And if you've been on the lots, it's unfortunate. I think we've talked about this before. I want these folks to, welcome back, Chris. I want these folks to be more knowledgeable. And again, Jace, we've talked about this in depth, but when you pull into a dealer, my first experience with the Lightning was with the guy walking out saying, "This truck can't tow." And we all know, those that know me know that's just very untrue. But that set the tone of that dealer. I didn't even want to deal with him, and I wasn't going to buy a new one anyway. I just was test driving a Lightning for the first time. But that set the tone for the entire experience with the guy. And I know there's other dealers that have done the same thing. And the misinformation that's floating right now about, am I supposed to get a fast charger adapter? Am I supposed to get a home charger or not? Am I supposed to get a mobile charger or not? Do those? And I know early on, like they were going to send you the Forged Charge Station Pro, but it was going to come from a different company, Sunrun at the time. Nobody knew that at the dealerships enough. It's hard enough to sell a truck, let alone an electric truck. And then you got all these questions, and I can understand from the dealer side that how that experience can be very frustrating. And that's the thing that, like on mine, I got almost 100% of my information from the Facebook groups. The group that we're part of, that's great.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it was both sides too, not just the dealer side. I think Ford struggled with the communication side too and keeping them apprised. And I do think they've gotten much better than that, than that now. But I will say too, I think the way that now that I'm thinking about this, I haven't really thought about this before, but the way I buy cars is probably, especially when it comes to EVs, like when we would go buy an ICE truck, right? There was, maybe 100 gray Lariats, with the 2.7 in our 45-minute vicinity that we could buy, so we could kind of shop around for dealers, but with these trucks, it's been very different. Other than Justin's truck, which we ordered, the other ones we've all gotten off the lot, and I've just called ahead and said, hey, I'm interested in this Lightning. I haven't even given them a chance to, kind of turn me down. So it is interesting to think every time I've purchased one, I've called them ahead of time and really kind of done most of the deal on the phone because they were the only one that had that car in the area, and so I had to have it.
And you're probably a pretty easy customer because you knew exactly what you wanted, and you didn't need any information from the dealer per se on the truck.
We're getting literally, like, I'm not test driving. I'm getting straight to the deal with them. I'm like, send me quotes. This is what I'm looking for. I'm not telling them this, but nobody else has the truck, so I need to figure it out and figure it out today.
That's kind of rare in this market. Chris, in yours experience, Chris says today he didn't need anything from the dealer tech wise on this truck. He had all his support from us. But I talked to another guy who, shout out, he listened last week or so on a podcast. He's still interested in Lightning. I think he's driving a 2.7 EcoBoost right now, and he's kind of interested in it. So there's some questions and some things to answer. And if you walk into the dealer and the first thing they tell you is this truck can't tow, boy, that's a turnoff. Or Absolutely. They don't know about all the ins and outs of the GOM not being accurate. Chris, you crawled in your truck and I noticed it said 300 miles. And we all know you're not going to get 300 miles today. You're going to get 200
Absolutely
miles
not.
Today. So
yeah. I'm at 1.8. I'm at 1.8 miles per kilowatt now. I was at 1.7 on a previous section. You're definitely not going to get, and you're going to charge to 90% and blah, blah, blah. And it's regular that we see those posts about mileage, and it's easy to wrap your head around once you do, but until you do, it's understandably.
Yeah, it's like, what the heck? I can't fill my truck up and I'm going to get 200 miles when it says 320. That's a third less. I mean, this is, even then, I've said this before, you're not getting 200 miles. You're getting 5% to 80%. So you're getting 3/4 of your battery at very best. Nobody goes below 5 really on a road trip. And if you do, you're pushing it. And over 80, it gets painful. And that's that 5 to 80 is that 40 to 44 minute time range. And that's the most efficient. So you got 3/4 of your battery.
But I bet I can get 350 out of this thing, even with the 22s on it, the way that my normal week cycle is,
right.
The way the barrier
That's
traffic
exactly
is,
right.
the commute. So it just depends on your use case and what you're doing with it.
One thing I was thinking about, sorry, Martin, one thing I was just thinking about, I almost wish that, and I'm never going to expect the dealer to know as much as we know, right? That is not a reasonable expectation. It's not going to happen. However, I almost wish that instead, and some dealers do this, but, I almost wish that they had, instead of, if they don't want to answer the question, that's fine, but have the knowledge to show them where to get the information, right? So maybe that's the Facebook groups. Maybe that's, and I've had conversations with Ford and other, deliver this feedback in dealers directly, just have the Facebook, F-150 Lightning owners group link on you and say, hey, look this up. If you're on Facebook, everybody is, for the vast majority, especially people, in our age range, like go on here. Any question that you could ever want, they'll have on there. The forum would be another great one, So if you don't want to learn the information, that's one thing, but at least be able to show people where to get the information.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good point. I think it would be tough for the dealer to point you to a Facebook group, though. I'm trying to play devil's advocate here because there's some misinformation and some bad information floating, so you really have to know what to wade through. And as a dealer,
I agree, but I think Colin has done a really good job on the owners group with the pinned notes. Like, out of all the groups, he's done a really fantastic job at like making sure that what's pinned is accurate, or at least as accurate.
And I try to do that too. If I see some bad information, I will chime in respectfully and say, hey, that's not correct. Here's really what happens. Or if somebody has a bad experience, they're just ranting and raving. There was a guy, and I forget his name. I posted on a post today where his truck died in the middle of the intersection, and the shifter had messed up on him, and he was hot. And I don't blame him. Him and his wife and his family is stuck in this intersection. That's not your typical experience, but for him, it is the experience, and it's a bad one. And so, and the tow truck driver didn't know how to tow, so that's really difficult when they don't know how to pull one up on there when the car's dead. And so it makes the experience worse. And
that was
there's corner conditions like that, but you really have to do your research.
That happened to me my second to the last time that I got stranded. When it at least happened within a neighborhood area, but I was stuck in an intersection. And the first tow truck driver didn't know how to get it towed. They had to get a second tow truck driver. It was raining. It was a hot mess of problems. And yeah, it's not just you. It's about your family, and it's about your wife and the faith that they have in this incredibly expensive truck that you spent money on, maybe even convince them to let you buy. And it's it's a tough thing. It really gets visceral at that point because it goes to the safety of your family. And I think that's ultimately why I, was really happy with the buyback, because I just felt like I couldn't trust the vehicle to have my family in it on any kind of meaningful road trip. And that's something that I understand this guy's frustration.
You're quite lucky that it broke down right after you got home the last time. Your wife probably would have been pissed if that happened on that vacation.
Less than 12 hours after getting back from that huge, 2,000-mile road trip to Arizona, the Grand Canyon, the very next morning, I mean, just hours away as I'm down to Southern California, it dies. And then I felt relieved almost, because then they thought they fixed it while I was down in Southern California at ACT Expo. They called me and they said, hey, we fixed it. And then just 3 or 4 hours later, all of the weird alarms and things started going off again. And I was relieved that it happened to them, where they thought they had it fixed, and there it is again. And it kind of just reinforced. And I think just at that point, I thought, it was already something that needed to happen, but it just drove it home at that point.
We know that you kind of still have access. They haven't ended your access on Ford Pass. Have you seen those weird alarms and stuff still happening?
I have not. And it's I went a week plus 2,000 miles without it happening. And before that, I really do think there's something with the DC to DC with the wire harnesses. They've replaced the wire harnesses twice. I just think there's a ground issue. We talked about this offline.
I think you got a Friday afternoon truck, Chris.
Yeah. So, I mean, I absolutely love the truck. It changed my life in so many positive ways. And yet I'm just relieved. I'm not happy to be done with it. I'm relieved.
Yeah. Like you said, it was a what's that phrase you used? It was a necessary evil or something along those lines, that you just had this love-hate with it.
Yeah, it was, it's like that girlfriend, that toxic relationship, right? That it's not good for you. You should stop seeing her, but man, the fun you have with her, it's so much great. It's unlike anything you've ever had, right? But man, you got to break up. You got to move on. It's just not healthy for anybody involved.
So you've got about, looks like if you're going to be there at 8:15, about 10 good solid minutes. Give us a few things that you're noticing. Obviously there's Blue Cruise. I don't mean that, but that you're noticing with this drive home that feels different or whatever on this versus your other Lariat. If for people who are considering Platinum versus Lariat, what are you noticing?
Honestly, not much. It feels, I'm sitting in it now. I can't see the colors of the seat. I'm just driving. Right, I just took Blue Cruise off because we're in an area where there's some traffic and I just wanted to drive. But it feels exactly like I was in my old truck. I mean, it doesn't feel any different. It
same color,
moves
even.
the same.
What do you think about the new animations in the instrument cluster?
Yeah, how about that?
Yeah, like when you change lanes, it's got a cool animation. It's got like different things in terms of but very subtle. Nothing ground breaking. Didn't have that stuff to begin with. So for me, it's all new.
Yeah,
it would have been new if it was the old stuff.
So you did get the charge speed now, though.
Yeah, the charge speed was cool. It was cool to be able to just peek in and look at the charge speed without having to open up a secondary app, be that the Ford Pass or the Tesla app. That was super cool, and that's frankly the way it should be.
That's a game changer for me on that last road trip, because I put that in my Lariat, and I never got an app. I didn't even have the OBD2 out on that trip, which is the first time ever that I wasn't using it.
It's nice. Just kind of there,
Yeah, I can't say that there's anything else. I mean, I can say there's all these little bells and whistles that are fun, and they're nice to have items, but none of them are required. None of them are for the quintessential Lightning experience. It's about the smooth, quiet, comfortable ride, and you're going to get that, be that XLT or Platinum or anything in between.
You're going to get that even out of a Pro.
Yeah. So
that's
my
takeaway.
Good.
That's good to know. So really, that's we're building an XLT at the shop right now, an extended range, and the guy put in those seat covers. They're those Amazon or whatever seat covers, and with that, and the big battery, I'm not going to notice a whole lot of difference in that truck other than no Blue Cruise and it has a smaller screen and no sunroof, which I like the sunroof, but they're notorious. I've put so many of those replacement tracks in the 18 to 23 F-150s because that little plastic clip on the front brakes. And so we'd like to know, when are they going to fix that so the track's just not a problem? And I saw a post this week. If people are complaining about that sunroof, let's talk about that for a second, because that thing has a drain. It drains between the two glass. If you used to take a flashlight up and look at your little between the headliner track and the glass, they drip water pretty significantly, like in a car wash, and that's designed to run down the track and out the drain tubes. So that is actually how it's made. Do I like that? No. Honestly, if I was ordering a new Lariat today, I would order it with no sunroof if I knew I was going to keep it. Only because, and you can't order one that way, but I would do that just because I don't want something else to go wrong. I do like the other stuff, the shifter. I enjoy folding that down and eating lunch at a Charger, and I enjoy the Blue Cruise and all that other stuff. But the sunroof is awesome when you're experiencing what a sunroof can do for you, but man, when it breaks, they're a mess.
Yeah, I mean, there's an argument to be made for the simplicity of, I had 2 rear taillight bars go out on me. So if there's no taillight bar, it can't fail. And, I've seen the leaky sunroofs that you've talked about. I've seen the hoses sometimes are run too long. Sometimes they get clogged. That's just so those are problems that are just waiting to happen. So I mean, there's an argument to be made about the simplicity of some of the other trims, and am I just trading one set of anxiety and problems for another set of anxiety and problems?
Yeah, Jesse commented, what range is enough for the F-150? Like, what range is enough? I don't know. I want to comment on that. I don't think it's range. I think it's charge time, and we've been through this 15 times, but if you could pull in 10 or 15 minutes and charge, 300 miles is more than enough. 250 is more than enough for me because I want to get out of the truck. But as long as I'm not out very long, it's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I do think there should be sort of like a number-ish. Like, Doug Field, I know from Ford, had talked about this at one point at Capital Markets Day, that like Ford sees a target of, around like 400 miles of range. But that's on highway with cold weather, so like that would be, I think, a good target if you could say range. But I completely agree with you, Martin, that the charge time and charge speed and all of that curve matter so much more than that. But I do think for the masses, you do have to sort of have a number out there that's decent, even though it doesn't matter in the scheme of things. It's optics, and it does matter to them.
Yeah.
Not like us, but in a different way. So I do think that like that 400 mile, I think, is like perfect for the public. So
that could be good. I agree, and I know Joel and
my
and
example
even Kurt
when I had
here,
the standard range.
Chris, you can't see, Joel and Kurt both agree. It's really more about charging times and speeds. I have a caveat for that though. If you're on a day that you're towing and you're trying to get somewhere and get home, like I do a lot, having that longer range so I could just get there and get home, that makes a difference for us towers that are towing a lot. My St. Louis day was to get that XLT was 700 miles, and it took 5 in the morning till like midnight, and I was done. I wanted to be home. I had 7 charge stops on the way home because I had a 40-mile-an-hour headwind, and that's tough. That makes it tough. So there's some guys that have been on the Chevy EV group that have been towing quite a bit lately, and they're putting up some pretty impressive numbers for towing. Now, not when you compare it back to like a 6.2 gas Chevy or a 3.5 EcoBoost. I mean, we can go 350, 400 miles of those towing. So it depends on your mood and what you want to do. But Chris, what's the charge speed? Since we're talking about charge speed, everybody's talking about that. What have you been seeing average? I don't know how many times you've charged it. Are you seeing one at 90 yet?
I don't know if I've got signal. I was hearing it.
Yeah, we just got you back.
Yeah. So what's your charge speed been peaking at today? What have you been seeing?
180 something is as much as I've seen. I know I can get up to like 190, 193. The last stop was disappointing. It got up to 178 at the Tesla charger, and then it kind of petered out, and it sat at like 105 for a long time.
I had that happen. I had that happen on a trip. Tesla charging station did the same thing. Now it was a 250 station, one of the older cabinets. I'm hoping you hit Electrify America somewhere on the way home, because they lately for me have been peaking a little higher, not a lot, but 5 to 10 kilowatts higher. Looks like you're there. Or getting close.
Yeah, I'm just I'm coming close, and I think this leg of the journey, for example, I've gone 204 miles. I've got 13% left in my range, so I feel comfortable doing it and driving the speed limits and everything, even 5 over. And so this is where the extended range is really a difference maker. There's an entire stop I didn't have to make in this condition. And, so there's something to be said for that. I think the public in general wants at least 300 miles of highway range. I think that's what most people want. I did the 230 or whatever it was rated at for 3 years, and went to Disneyland and San Diego, and went to Vegas, and went to Arizona, and I went just fine on the standard range. So you can make it work.
Oh yeah.
It sure is
and
nice.
Your use case for those guys that are just driving local, I would probably recommend to buy a standard range. If you're not going to take it on road trips, it's a cheaper truck by a considerable amount. And
it drives a little bit better. It's 500 pounds less. 600
Jake, really. That your first truck was a standard range. Yeah. So
I mean, there's
more payload.
Yeah, we're getting into the territory, like for me, for builders, that we're starting to see 22 pros with 50, 60,000 miles out there in that 10 grand range. So it's starting to become affordable for the masses on those guys that just want to drive it 20, 30 miles back and forth to work every day, or use it as a work truck. So yeah, I think that's going to be big. So Chris, I was just going to up this for that. We've got about 61 people on now. If anybody is wondering what from the title, it said live with 25 here. Chris bought a 25 Platinum Lightning. So he's driving 2,500 miles from Tennessee back to California in this Platinum. And how many miles do you have on it so far? How many miles have you put on the truck?
Right now I'm at 541.
Wow, 540 miles on a new truck. And you started with what, 30 or 40 miles on it when you got it today?
Yeah, like 49, I think it was, or something like that.
Yeah. That's awesome that you're getting to drive it from new, and this is you're really going to get comfortable with this thing. So, and it sounds like you're headed to the Franklin. There it is, the Franklin Charging Hub in Little Rock, Arkansas. So kind of a cool spot. I've been there myself, parked right where that Rivian is. This will be cool. Jump out, talk to those guys, and if we can hear you and listen in, we will. Otherwise, we'll keep commenting and keep it going, and we'll see you in hopefully about 44 minutes.
Yes, sir. It's going to be fun, guys. Thanks for letting me jump on, and then I'll catch up with you guys later.
Sounds good, Chris. Have fun.
All right. Appreciate it.
I'm going to leave this thing on mute, but I'll leave the camera on.
Yep. Man, what a trip. That's a trip he's really having a good time on, There's Joel. So, Jace, I know this feels like that, he's on this high right now with this new truck. I'm home. I'm sure you guys had the same thing when you got your Platinums.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, a little different in my situation, I think. But
not 2,500 miles right off the bat.
No, and to lose mine was sad, but unexpected, I think too. So it happened all really, really fast, like in a matter of, came together in like 4 days, but 2 days even, maybe, really. So but yeah,
you kind of get attached to them, don't we? I mean, do you feel that way about yours?
Almost
emotionally attached. Like we really need this almost as part of our identity. And I've done that on every vehicle that was cool that I ever owned, back from the early Lightnings all the way up through the Mustang Cobras. I had a SRT-10 Dodge Ram. I really got attached to that thing, and I'm not a Dodge fan, but I like that. But this is different this time. I sold my 22 to my brother-in-law, and and voluntarily, not like you guys where you were forced out of it, you know, with you and Chris, you kind of didn't have a choice. I shed a tear when that truck left, and that's dumb to say about a truck leaving, and because it was where it all started, you know, this whole podcast and the YouTube channel. It really is an interesting thing. So sorry, I don't want to get easy here, but I think it is interesting how we have a community of people willing to all talk and chat and learn from each other and try to promote this weird power that it hit me the other day driving. Why is there so much hate, even with the Cybertruck, you know, because it's kind of its own thing, but so much hate about the fuel that we're using driving down the road. You know, it's there. It can't be a battery. It has to be gasoline or diesel, or maybe some people would even go for, you know, propane or natural gas. But for the most part, you know, if you're an electric, it's tough. But then you get other guys who are truly interested, who are curious. You know, I have been my best friend for 30 years building trucks with. I bought the Tesla that we got from Chicago. I got it back finally. Got it running last night and drove it and took it down to his place. And he's been open-minded to the EV world and lifestyle. And I heard him say last night, when the Pro Lightning, I can build one for 10 or 12 grand, or any Lightning, he said, I'm going to own one. And I was like, hey, finally, a guy that is. Now, he did say in the same breath, now we're never taking it on a road trip. I'm not waiting at a charger. But for him, that local, charge it at home and run it around within a couple hundred miles, I think that's our key. And so getting guys like that to jump in is really, you know, I think that's going to be a game changer, because and it seems to be the truck that everybody kind of gravitates back to. I know that's conversation from last time, but it really is. I mean, there's still a lot of market share with Cybertruck and Rivian, and Silverado now is taking some Lightning guys, but then we have Lightning guys coming back, like Brandon Flash. He's back to a Lightning. He never was in one, but he bought one now. So, you know, and I think that's people are kind of coming around full circle from where they were at. And yeah, Jim, good point. Change is very scary, you know, to do something that you're not comfortable with, that you don't know. And especially when you hear the horror stories. Like, I don't know if Jace, if you remember the guy that was, I think, in Canada coming back through the US a couple years ago.
Yeah, I do. I think
he had to, like, he had this, the worst experience of no planning, just jumping a F-150 and expect it to take you to a charger and run out, and it's cold. And, you know, those are the kinds of things we were talking about earlier of not having knowledgeable, you know, if that guy had done his research on a group or had the dealer really tell him, you know, some of those things could have been alleviated, you know, just a little bit of research. So even me, you know, I feel like I could jump in the truck with no planning now and go anywhere. And I still plan. I still use a planner of some sort. My preference is a better route planner, but every time I go on a trip. So even Chris's trip right now, I'd have had that thing every single stop, knowing when I'm going to get there, where I'm hotel staying. But that's just my take on it. That's how I drive, even in a gas truck. I know where I'm going to stop. Some people are not there. So that change from, I just want to get in my truck, take off to wherever, and I know there'll be gas stations. I'm not going to worry about it. That's kind of hard.
Yeah, it's getting better, you know, I think for sure. I think that's why it's so important for manufacturers to be supporting like Apple Maps EV routing and Google Maps, you know, EV routing and all these other, you know, it's so crazy to me. I was talking about this on Twitter today that only Ford and Porsche are supporting Apple Maps EV routing. I mean, that makes no sense to me. You know, I know we saw CarPlay Ultra, you know, launch today, which was a kind of a big surprise, and you know, lots of integration there.
I'd like to. So, I read a little on it. I thought maybe you had some more information.
Yeah. So this is something that Apple's talked about for a long time. Basically, all the way back to like 2021, 2022. All in 2022, like a ton of manufacturers said that they were on board. A ton, including Mercedes-Benz, who has since in the last year backed out and said they don't want to give Apple control of, you know, all of these screens. He said it sounds like a nightmare. So Apple has gone back to the drawing board essentially and tried to sort of integrate it a little bit more seamlessly, right? You'll see if you watch the videos with the Aston Martin integration that most of the displays, specifically on the instrument cluster, are tailored, engineered or, designed by Aston Martin people. You'll see like, engineered in Great Britain. Like there are aspects of Aston Martin in the, the software that you see. But they're doing some really cool things. Like it's kind of a mix. It's cool. Like there's some screens on infotainment where maybe it's a super specialized screen to the car, if that makes sense. Like not just basic climate controls, but something like, spatial audio or, something specific. It will, I forget the exact name of what they're calling it, something UI, where they're essentially just bringing in, showing the layer of the normal, Aston Martin on top. And so for that specific screen, they're defaulting back to the Aston Martin setup. So it's kind of like a mix.
This is not a hardware change in your vehicle. You don't buy a screen or something. This is an integration from the manufacturer to have software that looks and integrates more with Apple than you would see otherwise.
Yes, I do though believe that there are some hardware requirements. We don't know what those are, but we have some clues in the fact that Aston Martin said they are, and who knows, right? Like if Aston Martin knew this in 2022, maybe they just kind of built their vehicles knowing, future-proofing them, knowing Apple CarPlay Ultra was coming. We don't know if that's the case for Ford. We don't know if Ford is even going to support it. They haven't said anything since 2022, so could be dead in the water. It could not be. So I've gotten this question a lot today. Do we think, since Aston Martin is saying the last couple years you can go to a dealer, and my guess is I think it's free, but there maybe there'll be some hardware changes. We don't really know yet. But if that's the case, could that be the case for something like our Lightnings or maybe our Mach-E's? I don't think so personally. That's just my opinion, my point of view. I don't see Ford doing that. It would be super atypical for them, but I think it depends on what the changes are.
If they rolled it out to like all of their vehicles, like as an option. So I don't think we're going to say it necessarily Lightning and Mach-E EV specific, but if in the Expedition or the F-150, they might have that as an option. I love the idea that you can take a phone and basically the customization that we have on our phones. Everybody's phone when you pick it up looks a little different. The way their icons are. When I first buy a new phone, I want the Facebook icon and my Instagram icon, those to be in a certain spot where I'm used to it. And you get in your truck and you kind of want to build it up the way you do. And there's not very many that allow that, even on the instrument cluster. Like the Mach-E is so limited and there's very little we can do, even with ForeScan. There's just not much you can do to fix that on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you can even add charge speed to the instrument cluster on a Mach-E yet.
Not to my knowledge, no. But I don't think it even exists from, I guess 25s did now have it, I think. But
do they?
I think they may.
So if they do, I'm going to work on that because that's something that we're missing in the Mach-E that to me is big. I know we hit on this a few minutes ago, but I got to tell you, that's one of all the things that ForeScan and all these have done, besides the Matrix headlights, which is an awesome thing, that charge speed, it hit me like a ton of bricks. I didn't think I was going to enjoy that so much. Even Blue Cruise 1.4 wasn't, it's better. And, it's nice to tap that signal and move over. It's not what I thought it was going to be. It's awesome. Don't get me wrong. Not compared to full self-drive in a Tesla, but we're talking about a legacy automaker who's getting into that self-drive mode. But the charge speed deal was huge. I couldn't believe it. Yeah. Did you notice that coming from a 22 to 24? Was that impactful for you, or just not fast charge enough to really see that?
No, right away. Because it does it for AC charging too. So it's nice to see it. It's nice to see it both ways. But yeah, the customization with the CarPlay Ultra is really, really cool. It'll be interesting to see it done in an EV way. Because the Aston Martin's is an ICE vehicle, so it's not really, what we've seen so far is not representative of maybe what we would see, but it's all the same. You're just kind of swapping things other than fuel. You're kind of just showing EV, but there are little differences, like you mentioned, charge speed being shown versus, I don't need gasoline speed, so there are going to be some little changes that we see here and there, but I don't know. I think sort of that is maybe what all this goes into with the FNV4 cancellation. And Doug Field talking about how kind of they can, in their eyes, in their opinion, get what customers want while sort of satisfying their own supplier tier 1 network and all that stuff as well, that they can, instead of going from the zonal, they can have
talk about that a little bit. You mentioned that for the people that don't know exactly what that is. Talk about that architecture that they kind of canceled.
So like with Rivian and Tesla and all these, Slate, I know was going to do what's called a zonal architecture, right? So you're essentially eliminating miles of cables. You're having a big brain, one central big brain, right? That's how Rivians do it. That's how Tesla do it. It's a chip, big NVIDIA chip in there, just running stuff. Ford uses a supplier network. They've done it for years and years and years. It's funny, when Ford started in Model T, they were the most vertically integrated company on planet Earth, and they've kind of gotten away with that as scale has kind of, become involved, right? So with FNV4, Ford hired Doug Field. He worked at Apple with the Apple Car project. He essentially, was the reason Model 3 is successful. He built it, from the ground up with him and Elon and all the others, that were involved. And he, made Model 3 what it is. So they hired him. Ford scooped him up and said, we want you to, run our EVs Model E program, but we also want you to, be basically our head of software. And it wasn't even just software. At first, it was kind of software for just EVs. But you can kind of see how the situation has changed as the years have gone on. Doug, in my opinion, has focused now less on the EV side because it didn't necessarily make sense for Ford when they started doing that. They were making very big expenditures and had huge budgets for, in their eyes, a very limited slice of the current market, right? So, Ford still sells 90 some +% EV or ICE. It's
right.
The vast majority of what they sell is still ICE, and the vast majority of, unfortunately, what the market buys is still ICE. And so Ford scooped up Doug. They had him, started these huge projects, and as we've seen, things have changed. Not just software, but the market has changed. EVs growth has continued, but has slowed a little bit compared to what it was.
Certainly not what their anticipation for sales was.
Definitely. And so Ford sort of had this huge program. I think it was they spent $5 billion, something huge, on FNV4, which was supposed to be their next generation. I think it stands for Ford something connected vehicle. I'll have to look that up again. Connected vehicle Ford, something like that. So
moving towards an architecture like Tesla or Rivian.
Correct. So zonal architecture. Yep. You would eliminate miles of cables, right? Blah, 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 blah. But Doug Field gave an interview the other day, and he kind of said, the reason why we've decided to move on from it is because we sort of looked at the market. We looked at everything and we said, there's too much money being spent on this, and we think that we can get the same thing done with FNV3. And what he sort of explained it as is, if Ford takes control of let's say instead of just one brain, there's 2 or 3 brains, maybe 4 brains, and Ford would have direct code for those. They would write the code for those. They would have direct control over those 3 or 4 main brains. And then the rest would be out to the supplier network. It achieves, in Ford's eyes and in Ford's view, and what they say they have learned, is that it achieves the same goal as the Tesla and Rivians to the customer, to the end user. They're experiencing the same thing. The end user doesn't care where or how it's done or what it's done with. They just care how they interact with it and how it works for them. Yep. So they think they can get the same thing done with 3 or 4 mini brains that Tesla and Rivian get done with one main brain.
Which I think there's pros and cons to both. You know, when you have one that goes out, everything goes out. When you have another one that goes out, you maybe some other things still work, maybe not. I know that I've replaced a couple of the MCU ones in these Teslas that we've built, and that is the car. I mean, when you remove that, nothing works on the car anymore, and it can go out and the car can still kind of function. You know, like the main screens go out on those. They have the leaky screen and stuff.
Yeah.
And it can stop functioning from a visual standpoint and the car will still work. I know sometimes when that goes out, the car stops working altogether because some of the early chips weren't as robust for the data that gets written to them. I know the Tesla architecture in the early Model S's, the data transfer was massive and those chips just couldn't handle it. When they went to the MCU2, it's a lot better. I have one in this new car, this 15 that we got in, pleasantly surprised they had the $2,000 MCU2 upgrade, and it's snappy. It works really well. I was very impressed. That car is when we sell it, somebody's going to get a hell of a car because it's 31,000 mile 15 with an MCU2 with an awesome battery. I checked battery health. I know we're getting off subject here a little bit, but I checked the battery health on that car through Scan My Tesla. That car had been DC fast charged for exactly 15 kilowatts.
Wow, that's crazy.
So like a quarter tank one time. It's been his whole life in a garage charging at somebody's house and no rust. I mean, it was neat. So anyway, so I think you're seeing that MCU upgrade. And I guess, I don't know if for those listening, the MCU2 shares platform with the Model X. So the S and the X share a platform. The 3 and the Y, I won't say share a platform, but they're more like brothers than the S and the X. Of course, Cybertruck's out on its own, but do you know, did they talk about it, has Ford talked about switching away from the 12-volt architecture and going to a 24 or 48-volt system? Have you heard anything along those lines?
The last news on that was when Elon sent the stuff to Jim Farley. And all the other. Yeah. Howdy.
Just want to chime in real quick, let these guys introduce themselves and say hi real quick, and then we're going to do some video, so I'm going to go offline for a minute, but figured came all this way. Want to let these guys say hi. So,
hey, Jace. Hey, Martin. Joel, y'all know me.
Joel.
Yes, sir. Howdy.
Franklin. EV Geek Podcast. Look us up on YouTube.
EV Geek always chimes in with the comments, and we need to get them on the show. That'll be cool.
Absolutely.
We should.
So I'm gonna take a walk through and get some video, but I'll catch up with you guys later.
Awesome. Right. Have fun, guys. Enjoy it.
We'll talk to you shortly. Yeah, that's cool to have our. He's got a big podcast. I didn't realize it was as big a following, so it's really cool.
Yeah, it is. No, they're awesome people and just great folks. I was on their show one time and it was awesome.
Yeah,
it was a great experience.
So that anyway, we were talking about. I didn't realize that those two share platforms. So do you know? When the question was, are they thinking about moving to that?
So the latest news was when Elon, sent that the master plan, I guess you would call it, for the 48-volt architecture to all of the OEMs, including Ford, and Jim very publicly on Twitter said, thank you very much. We'll look into it. I had heard rumors before that Ford was looking into that. I don't know, man. Ford moves at their own speed and at their own drum, and so it's hard.
This was something that was talked about back in the 60s and 70s. Really, really, it makes a lot of sense from an electrical standpoint because at 48 volt, it's still considered touch safe, and the wire size can go way down to carry amperage and stuff. You have less issues. Now, there's other things that can happen with it. That there's pros and cons, but the hardest part is like what Jim said earlier. Change is scary. When you start talking about, it's not so much, from what I understand, it's not so much the 48-volt battery and the system. It's all the switches, the lights, the knobs, everything that's peripheral around it being able to be compatible with that higher voltage. And we just don't make mainstream 48-volt stuff. And I know at one point Elon said, you're either going to do it or we're going to do it in-house. And that, I think a lot of what he did with the Cybertruck, he said, we're going to bring it in. So I would like to see it from electrical engineering standpoint. working
I think
on
the problem I agree with you. I think I'd like to see it. The problem with it is it doesn't necessarily translate to sales, right? And I think that's what Ford is seeing. That's what GM is seeing. That's, Elon can say, oh, well, this is better. And and I don't disagree with him. Don't get me wrong. Like I get it. That's what his MO is, right? He's a pusher. He's, he pushes us along. And I really appreciate that about him. I do. But there is that flip coin of things where Ford is a 120-year-old business.
Right.
Yeah. And they have to look at it from that perspective. And, for better or for worse, Ford Legal is quite large. The red tape there, I'm sure, is a lot to work through with the giant machete. But there are pros and there are cons. Like we go back to all the time. There's just pros and cons to both. And I think there's room for all of them because the customer doesn't care. Again, the customer doesn't care if it's 48-volt battery. They don't care if it's 12-volt battery. Maybe some of us
care. If you go to O'Reilly's to get you a new battery for your 10-year-old F-150 and they don't stock, or your 2-year-old F-150 and they don't stock a 48-volt, that's going to piss some guys off that are used to just throwing a battery out of their old farm truck in it to get them to the store. I think if, and this is a huge if Ford could move to a 48-volt system and it reduced the cost of the truck significantly, where prices could not go up or even come down, that might be where an impact to the customer would be. But unfortunately, as we've seen, inflation and outside factors are going to continue to drive up costs. And I think the manufacturers are really, truly doing the best we can. Even at John Deere, we do the best we can to do cost reduction as often as possible. We'll look at a program and try to pull costs out of it, but that doesn't necessarily translate to when you go, like, for instance, if that happened in the egg industry, you can go to buy eggs and they're $3 a dozen, and all of a sudden one little blip happens, they're $9 a dozen. Well, there's not any way to really get that back down to $2 a dozen. You're just not, you can't do that. But what we can do is try to hedge off that from going to $12 a dozen. So I'm thinking that could be the thing that could maybe keep the trucks manageable. But for most folks, I remember back in 95, and this is taking me way back. I was in high school, and you could buy a brand new F-150 for $12,000. A base model, 6-cylinder, 2-door Eddie Bauer, just a base truck. For those who remember the Eddie Bauer, it was a cool little truck.
I remember.
$12,000, and now, Jace, do you know if you were buying the most base 2-door, is it even in the 30s or is it going to be in the 40s now?
I believe you are in the 30s technically, but it's like 37, 38 if I'm not mistaken.
You're going to be 40 after you get out the door with the taxes and the stuff. So for a base truck, 4 times the cost, which is probably about right for everything else that's went up over the years.
Yeah. And something I was going to, it's all very interesting. I will say though, Ford moving to a 48-volt system would be very different than Tesla moving to a 48-volt system. Immediately, and I mean instantaneously, that would shift every supplier known to man in those, Napa and O'Reilly and all of them. They would instantly be, getting into gear, knowing that this is a huge paradigm shift, so to speak. So,
and that's consideration, right? Ford doesn't necessarily want to support those aftermarket companies, but in reality, an O'Reilly's and an AutoZone and a Napa, that is a big part of the business.
Absolutely.
With Tesla, when you walk into, I'm going to pick on AutoZone because I was there this weekend, and I asked them for some antifreeze. I said, hey, do you guys not stock G48? Because it's the type of antifreeze that runs in a Tesla. And he goes, never heard of it. What's that for? And the guy was, I said, oh, it's what they use in a Tesla. He said, immediately, without hesitation, we don't stock any parts for Tesla. Just that fast. And I thought, wait a minute, it's antifreeze. And O'Reilly's has it. AutoZone doesn't. And I thought that was a little bit, he almost looked at me like I didn't get the Cybertruck flip, middle finger, but it was, you're asking about a Tesla in AutoZone, you need to leave. I had that feeling. That's probably my own, takeaway, because I have this whole electric thing in my mind, and I'm thinking, man, it's just a car. Why do you got to be so negative about it? But it was interesting that my point being, you don't go to AutoZone and buy parts for your Tesla. They don't stock them.
Yeah, and wipers are difficult, more difficult. Like there are and this goes back kind of the whole conversation of, having Ford dealers too, and having 3,000 Ford dealers versus 180, Tesla service centers. I mean, you're just, the odds, that you're going to get good service are higher just because statistics are higher that you're going to be able to find a dealer.
It does matter about the dealer, but even now, Ford, there's a lot of dealers. Like if you need a part for your truck, you can just Google search what you're looking for. You can get a part number within a couple minutes, and you can find 100 dealers that are Ford dealers that have that part online, and they'll ship it to your house. If you don't want to go to the
Lakeland, and there's all those. I mean, we know I've ordered some. There's a big one here. It's a Canfield. There's one or something in by Youngstown. I mean, it's crazy.
Try to do that with a Tesla part. And I'm not,
and I think that's what people but I don't think that's what people understand is that network is meaningful to people every single day that buy Ford vehicles, GM vehicles, but particularly Ford. They're the way that the dealer network is set up and the way that parts are set up, and they make so many of them. I mean, they have to, you have to be able to have access to these parts. But I can literally find, like you said, like I could find 25, even more, 50 different dealers willing to ship me the part. And I could price match between all of them. I could say who has cheaper shipping, who has cheaper, who will, use points versus who won't, I mean, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah. And that's a good point. And it's not just Ford. I mean, you can go into XYZ, AutoZone, O'Reilly's, Pep Boys, any of these parts stores, from a Nissan to a Toyota to a Volkswagen, and they probably are going to have it on the shelf. If not, can get it for you that day or the next day. It's pretty massive. And as Tesla cuts their own path and does their own thing, they have cut themselves completely out of that. There is no support in that realm. Now you can get on Tesla EPC parts and you can order them and have them in a week or two. And most of them are reasonable. I will say these old Model S's that I've been working on, the front grill, that they call it the elephant grill or whatever, it's like $100. And the piece, they're not expensive. But I tried to buy a back bumper this last week for this car we got in, and they want $1,250 for the plastic bumper. And I'm like, wait a minute, that's not aligning for even the Mach-E rear bumper's not that much. Yeah. So that's something that I noticed. But we're gonna have to change mindsets at some point, but I think you're right. There's so much aftermarket support for what Ford has built for the last 100 years. That change to 48 volts.
That has to go into Ford's decisions. I mean, all of that has to weigh in on when they decide. And it's not that Ford does make groundbreaking moves. I mean, 2015, aluminum body, that was a huge move. People still have not matched Ford's aluminum stamping capabilities.
And there are people who still hate that, and that's 10 years old. They still complain about the Ford aluminum body, and I've built a bunch of them now, and I got to tell you, that aluminum body is pretty damn tough. You may be able to pinpoint a toolbox in the bed and rip a hole through it, but I built a lot of pickups and seen a lot of wrecks, and these two Lightnings, they're not wrecked any harder, or things aren't bent any worse than with the regular. And Jace, you saw your truck.
I was going to say, I've wrecked two of them myself, and they are tanks. There's no, I haven't been in a lot of car accidents, but both of them happen to be in F-150s that are aluminum body. Yeah. And I gotta say, I mean, it was a tank. I've never experienced anything like it besides the head slapping. I mean, that's it. I mean, it was.
I keep a fender hanging in the shop off of my first one, and it weighs about 2.5 pounds for the whole fender. So it's an interesting. Yeah, there you go. It's an interesting how light parts can be, and people think, oh, you're going to destroy it. Well, I'll tell you, if you wreck up against a concrete wall down the left side of your truck in a steel truck or an aluminum truck, the insurance estimate per the time they're built in is going to be about the same. Take a 25 model Silverado and run it down a brick wall, and a Lightning down a brick wall. The estimate's going to be very similar. I mean, and
that's a good example I think of too. Like when I talk to, paintless dent repair places and stuff, they used to, I remember back in the day, they'd kind of, aluminum. And now they have to do them. They've had to learn, they might grudge a little. Oh, well, aluminum, it doesn't have
it's harder to get it to move. I've PDR
the memory.
Yes. It's hard to get it to move. And when you heat it
and stay.
Right. So in a respect, it's not as malleable as the steel truck.
Absolutely.
And so I'm not going to say it's more dent resistant because it's not, but it doesn't move as easy. I'll tell you that. It wants to tear, not move.
Yeah. So but they've learned the skill because they've had to, and there's no doubt aluminum repair PDR is more of a pain in the ass than it is with steel, but they've had to learn it because you've got, the Mach-E, I'm pretty sure was aluminum too. The door panels were aluminum. So I had a dent in one of those and they had to, they weren't even sure if, it was brand new. They're like, is it aluminum or is it steel? And I'm like,
I had to do that.
They were.
And it's a mixture. Like Tesla's all aluminum.
Yep.
They're like the upper control arms are steel. The shocks are steel, but that car's fully aluminum. Even the frame, and I don't know on the Cybertruck. I think it's the Giga casting, so I think it's aluminum too.
It is aluminum. And I was reading an article about that the other day that right now aluminum, repair for Giga casts just doesn't exist. There's
that
no.
Scares me. I want to buy a Cybertruck to build. After my experience in one, just like I've said before, I don't care about all the politics. Just look at the truck for what it is. But to buy one and hit in the front, and if there's a Giga casting that has a problem and I can't fix it, there's one thing to fix it for me that I'm going to keep. But there's another thing to be welding up a Giga casting in aluminum to sell to somebody and have that responsibility level. On an F-150 frame, you can take it to the frame shop and they can straighten it and you can heat it. It's steel. We're used to it. We know what it's going to do. We know what's going to act in another accident past the first one, which is always the fear. Like in my business, when you fix a truck, it needs to be able to handle an accident the second time the same as it did the first time. Mm-hmm. No problems with the same level of, which is why a lot of times I don't
integrity.
I don't pull the frames. We replace them, but they're you can section one out. You can put it back to original specs. The Ford has, repair manuals on how to straighten frames or repair frames, but I don't think there's anything like that on the Cybertruck as far as that Giga casting. I think they don't recommend yet that I've seen to fix it if it's broken. And like we've seen the two videos where obviously we're like Whistling Diesel ripped the back bumper off, and then Zach from
Jerry Rigs Everything.
Jerry Rigs Everything. He did it very strategically, and when you break that, I don't know that there's a real easy way to fix it. Can it be fixed? Sure. Would it be approved by Tesla? Probably not.
Yeah.
So,
and it's interesting. It's but when people are like, Cybertruck and it's going to be the best product in the world and blah 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 blah. Well, in quarter1, I hate to tell you, and in March, Lightning outsold Cybertruck.
Oh yeah,
that's official. That's
and
official.
You know what?
As of
I
today.
think the polarizing look is a lot of that. People can't.
Yeah, for sure.
They're not on that, but the cost, the Lightnings are cheaper. And it's a solid truck. If the Cybertruck had come out what they said they were going to do, 500 miles, all these grand things that was supposed to happen
for $30K,
If you just look at pure specs, it doesn't outperform the Lightning. It's not worse, but it's not better. Whereas the Silverado, in specs, it does, but it's $80,000 to $90,000. Now, if you can go find an LT, like I know Patrick bought his LT in the 40s. Now he got a special deal, but there's LTs being sold right now in the 50s, in the mid to upper 50s, and that's a 450 mile range truck. So that's going to be the tough thing. And then of course we saw this week where they kind of released it's been out there, but kind of released the manganese base battery, and that could be a big thing. And I think. In my gut, there's a lot happening at Ford right now in battery tech that we don't know about.
And to be honest, GM releasing the same article with the same title, Breakthrough, told me all I needed to know. Right there, that told me they're taking it seriously. They are working on it. They just don't. They know they have time, and I believe that. They know that they have time to figure this out. And if LMR is real, I mean, I was reading an article today, like, LMR could be all North American / United States supply chain with a cheap, good, safe battery it could keep us in front of China. Maybe not direct specs, but at least in terms of cost.
And then you see CATL had their article out with the sodium based battery that's performing it's not quite as energy dense as the rest, but it's completely safe. There's no real, you never say never, but there's not really much risk of fire with that. And I think that's a great thing to push even if China's pushing the tech where we have to be forced to keep up, because I got to tell you, they kind of bypass the safeties and they'll stick something out there quick. That's why you don't see Chinese.
And they subsidize. And they subsidize to make it happen. I mean, if we're going to do this whole regional thing, then, we don't really need to go tit for tat with China, directly. If it's going to be regional business, we don't need to. However, there's, I think, a limit to that, and we have to keep up somehow, some way. But I do think the big three are taking this seriously. That, like I said, GM coming out with the same article with the same title told me, okay, that this isn't just Ford. This is the money is follow the money. That's about it. Follow the money.
You know what? And like we mentioned earlier, people don't care what the architecture is. They don't care most people don't care what's in the battery. They just need it to work.
Yeah.
If it's
as long as it's not going to be dangerous,
or fairy dust, people don't care. It needs to.
If you could change the optics and tell them that it's even safer, huge. Like even better. If that, icing on the cake. If you can tell them, hey, you get all the same stuff, but it's also never going to catch fire. Ever.
And that's going to be a tough sell, because right now, if you go talk to any firefighter about an EV or truck driver, they don't want anything to do with them because the danger is there. What's crazy is it's there with a gasoline truck too.
Right.
The hard part is you can put a gasoline truck out. We don't have the training to put out an EV fire when it does happen, and it happens rare, but it does happen. I'm on the Polaris Kinetic forum, which is the side by side, and there was a guy that had $1 million building burned to the ground by his Kinetic that caught on fire. They had a problem with a crack that happened in the battery, and it got infiltrated with water. There's a stop ship, stop ride on the Polaris Kinetic. I think it maybe just got lifted. That's a problem. And so we've had 2 or 3 or 4 years here, even with Tesla before, that EVs catch on fire and they burn down. You heard that a lot. So even when we come out with this new tech, it's going to take a while. The Mach-E is 100% charge now every day on that, what's the battery tech? I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank.
That's
LFP.
LFP on the, are you at LFP or you have?
Yeah, that's what I was talking about. The LFP battery is charge it to 100% every day. They want you to, which is not the case with the Lightning battery. It's completely different. And so even then, people are like, okay, do I charge it to 100% every day? Do I not? We're going to have to get some better visibility to that so people understand it. And I think if we can all get to a battery tech that's just, hey, don't worry about it. It's safe. Charge it to 100%. Drive it like you want to drive it. And then hopefully we get some 8, 9, 10C rating on this, like we saw out of the Golden Battery, like we've seen out of some of CATL stuff. Obviously, Kyle went overseas and saw some fantastic charge speeds. My gut is those batteries aren't going to last. Charge them like that.
Yeah.
But I would. Time will tell.
But and it's interesting too, because a lot of these, people, EVs catch on fire, right, blah 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 blah. A lot of times it's not even the EV; it's the charger or it's the outlet, that started the fire. Like it's not even the car,
even the gas truck. Gas trucks don't necessarily catch on fire because something related to gas. I mean, that once it gets to that point, the gas is going to take off and catch on fire, right. But you could have had a wheel bearing that come from AutoZone that overheated, and now the truck's on fire.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So I just think
it's just there. I don't mean to pick on AutoZone. Aftermarket parts don't always meet the spec, but they're cheaper for a reason. They're reman. They may have some
absolutely. Quality, they might not test and exactly.
Yeah. So anyhow, this is good information. I think if we can keep this going and keep people informed, we'll bring awareness to this a lot faster. I'd like to see more and more and more of this. We need to have on some tech specialists from the battery. We need to find somebody who's really into that battery tech and see if we can get some latest information more on that. I know there was about 8 months ago, Monroe had released that little plastic pouch style battery that they had said Ford had partnered with. And it's all he said. And I haven't heard much about it since. I think it was a PACU or something like that. I can't remember the name, but that was a really neat, because you just laid them on top of each other and you had, 2 or 3 volts in each one. He stacked them up and then they had 10 volts. It was pretty safe. You could pierce them and they didn't. So that's another thing that we need to get somebody on that knows battery tech and is really,
that'd be cool.
Really there. Because I'm getting pretty experienced with the Tesla batteries after doing as much as we had, but that's old tech, that's 10-year-old technology.
Pouch cells too. And pouch cells are old technology now. I mean, it's we're moving so quick. It's going to be fascinating to see kind of what happens and how it all takes place and what goes down. But I'm excited for it. But I do think we're a little bit off. We got a little ways to go. That's the unfortunate part, before. I mean, we're going to see some Chinese breakthroughs, obviously, and stuff. But as far as I think stuff here, in the US, I think we're a little behind. It's going to take a little bit. But once it starts rolling, I really do think there's going to be some fun stuff and some really good things that hopefully we'll be talking about on here.
Yeah. You're here every day now, it seems like, about something else in a breakthrough, whether it's China or here. And then all these new battery facilities that are being built. I know there's a huge, over by Kansas City, a huge battery facility. I want to say it was Panasonic. It could have been LG. I don't remember, but it's just a massive facility that doesn't get a lot of, praise in the media because it's a battery facility and people don't think that, we even need this. Like, it's like the windmills. Right. I don't know if you guys have those wind generators in Ohio, but it's massive here all the way out to Colorado and in Texas. And there's a lot of hate. If you drive through Kansas in a wind farm area, you're going to see signs that people put up that says, vote this no to wind farms, like they don't want it. And I understand that where that's coming from, but from a tech standpoint, there is a space where that works. It's not necessarily the right, like a lightning. It's not the right tool for every job, but there's a space where that works. If you, if you're trying to support the movie Landman, if you're trying to support having power in a remote area to get fossil fuels out of the ground, he made a comment that these windmills are here because they help the fossil fuel area. Okay, great. Let's develop that tech and get it better. So maybe someday when we're trying to generate our own fuel, not coming out of the ground, that might be a good opportunity. So yeah, I've even looked at those. I don't know if you guys have any solar. We've been looking at solar a little bit for the house and looking at the wind generators. There's a small 5 to 7 kilowatt you can put at the house that's $3,000 or $4,000 now, and I've been looking at those to try to do some of that, but haven't yet. Cool. You guys, are you doing any solar or anything at your place?
We sell solar, so we'd love to do GAF solar shingles or something like that, but we just have way too many trees. We don't face properly. But also on top of that, the county/town does not allow any solar shingles or panels on the front of the house whatsoever. So none. Yep, none on the front, which takes away. So many people, for us, that's the difference between, a full, system and financially it not making any sense. And in Ohio, it already doesn't make a lot of sense. You have to really want solar. You can make the numbers, kind of work if you really want to and take advantage of certain tax credits and, including the price of solar in the loan, so there are ways to like make it worth it, sort of. But it's not like you're eventually maybe going to, have some money, but it just doesn't, it's tough with the snow, trees, clouds, all of everything added up. It almost makes sense to, if you really, really want it, put it in your backyard. Don't put it on top of the house.
Yeah. And
they won't let you put it on the front anyway. So.
Yeah, and I think like Kansas, Oklahoma, clear down into Texas, obviously Florida and California are big with it, but here they don't do a whole lot. It's not promoted heavily to try to get you to put solar on. There's programs in Southeast Kansas that do that, but it's a net metering deal where you're never going to have your bill go to zero. It'll be a credit, and you can kind of sort of sell it back, but you're selling it back at wholesale prices. And so for me, I'm trying to do this so I have energy storage to dump back into the truck to try to help offset the bill a little bit. But not everybody's there. So
luckily for us, we have work charging. So
that
has been our, sort of way of doing it, just because it's solar for us. We can maybe someday put it in the backyard, but it just doesn't make sense really as far as, you know, what we would want with it, you know.
I mean, I'm complaining about it trying to do this, but the energy fuel cost has went down so much with this truck than it normally does with a gas. I mean, I bought gas this week for the lawnmower, and it was like $2.80 at almost $3 a gallon. I heard Trump saying something last week about energy costs being as low. There were some places that he said it was into the ones, the $1.97, $1.98. I don't know where that's at.
Yeah, I don't know where that is. We're still at 280s too, so
yeah, it's expensive. So I don't know if that was a time or what, but he keeps pushing that, and I would love it if energy costs could come down. I did see oil was dropping, so maybe we'll see fuel start to come down for the, you know. But we don't want oil to drop too far because that hurts things as well. It needs to kind of stay in that $60 or $70 a barrel range. I hate to say it, but that's a good place for us to be. But anyway, while we're waiting on Chris to come back, and we only got about 30 minutes left, I was gonna for guys that are curious how the Lightning drivewall charging generator is going. I was going to give an update on that. So I spent some time with Zach in Tulsa, and Pat and I have had a lot of conversations recently. That's slowing down as far as pushing it towards a goal, which my goal was to be able to use the Lightning on this California trip that I have coming up, this 4,500-mile trip. We've kind of moved away from it for that trip. And the reason is I need some time to vet that out. So we're getting close to having it functional. But I need some time to vet it out. I don't want to take it on a 4,500-mile trip without a couple thousand miles locally. So we have figured out how to make it activate. We have figured out how to make it charge while you're driving with the onboard chargers. What we're trying to do now is kind of go through all the safeties of that, and then how is that going to manage through the screen. So we're going to have a middleman, like a middleman controller, and that will turn things on and off like it's supposed to. It'll monitor temperatures, so if your onboard charger gets hot, your temperature of your truck gets hot, it'll turn things on and off. So we need some time to vet that out, to really go through that and do a proper, you know, for those that are in the engineering world, a proper FEMA to make sure that is safe. But so we also looked at we just got this Model S in. It's free supercharging on the older Model S's. They come with it. So as bad as I hate to say it, we're going to take the Tesla on this California trip. We've decided it's free supercharging. It's a nice car, 30,000 miles. I've never been on a long trip in an S. We've taken a couple in a Model 3, which I don't love because they're a loud car compared to other EVs. Not a bad car, just a little noisy for me.
Makes sense, yeah.
I'm probably going to regret this because I love driving in Lightning. There's nothing better on a road trip of anything I've ever been in, but we're going to do it. The whole point of the truck this time was to prove out that generator and get that 500-600 mile range. And there will be other trips. I've got a Canada trip coming, and we've got our Colorado trip coming. We're both 3,500 mile trips, and I'm hoping to have it going for then. And those will both be towing, which was the point of the generator, to actually increase that tow range. You know, if you can buy a Lightning, buy one of our middleman, buy a $3,500 generator and get 500 miles out of it, 250 towing. Guess what? You might not have to go buy a Silverado.
Yeah.
You might be able to do it with your Lightning, but we'll see.
For sure.
Anyhow, I just thought I'd give an update on that because I know I've had a lot of people asking me, "Hey, what's up with the generator? Are we getting closer on that?" And I'm like, it like Ford, we're going to be conservative. We're going to make sure this is right before we release anything. So,
that makes sense.
Anyway.
Some other interesting news today. Expedition became the first Ford ICE vehicle to get phone as a key.
Oh, they got PAC on Expedition.
Yep.
Now,
the first Ford ICE vehicle. Lincolns have had it, a couple of them. Navigator, Corsair, Aviator, I want to say, probably Model S. But no Ford ICE vehicles have had it until now.
Wow. And now are they going to put that in retroactively when they do the recall? Sorry, I had to ding for it a little bit. I think they had a problem.
No, it seems like it's just the stealth. I think you get like the stealth appearance package, which is nice because that package is not that much. The platinum one is a little bit more, like 10,000 or something. But the stealth one's only like $5,000 or something like that, which onto Expedition is not that much.
It kind of kills me that we waited this long, and it's something that I think is pretty simple. I mean, the remote function actuator is that Bluetooth communication module. It's not it's kind of expensive. It's a couple $100 to buy one from when I had to replace one.
Yeah.
It's not that difficult to add that. I don't know why all manufacturers haven't migrated towards that a little more. I know Toyota's had the card for a long time.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the liability piece of it or exactly like what it is, to be honest with you. I didn't realize it originally launched in 2020 with the Lincoln Navigator, which I thought was interesting. I did not know it was that long ago. That Ford, I mean, that's 5 years now.
Right. Of course, Tesla's had it since 16, 17. I know our Model S do not.
Yeah, and and it's funny because they all, some are Bluetooth low energy. I know the new Teslas use ultra wideband, so there's all sorts of different little caveats to it. But fascinating. I just thought that was interesting that Expedition added it, which was good news in my opinion, though, because I think that it signifies that Ford is sticking with it, because we hadn't seen it. We hadn't, the Explorer just completely was redone, and multiple cars were redone, right, and revamped and re-released, and we didn't see phone as a key on any of them. So I was kind of like, well, shoot, why is it just exclusive to Ford EVs? It made no sense. And I was kind of worried that not that Ford was going to get rid of it, but that they just weren't, putting resources into it to improve it or, add it to more vehicles other than the Ford EVs. But now that we see it in Expedition, I'm happy that I think that they are going to continue to support it. And it's going to be, something that they work to improve.
One thing that Ford has done that I really appreciate is with the Lightning, even phone as a key, you still get a fob. I love the idea that that's over in the drawer. It maybe, and I don't carry it. I haven't carried a fob in 2 years, but the fact that it's there, that first Canada trip, man, I had it in the truck. I couldn't not take it. The last one we did, I didn't take it. The New Orleans trip, I didn't take it. I feel comfortable enough having the exterior key code, having the backup passcode. There's enough redundancy in that system that I feel like we can still travel. Is it going to be inconvenienced to have to punch the code in every time? Yes. And early on, they had the issue where you'd push the screen and the number pad wouldn't come up. And I think that's been resolved in the software update. I haven't had that in a while. But the fact that my point was the fact that they still give you a fob. Because there are some guys that just like to carry the fob. And I was one of those for a long time. And now.
Yeah, and some people have house keys still. And so they're just carrying it around anyway. I used to be like that until we got the Mach-E and phone is a key capable vehicles, and then we sort of shifted our the way that we enter our home because we had that, and I didn't want to carry keys around anymore. So
are you now, not to give anything away, but are you using your phone as a key for your house, or do you still have a regular key or a keypad or something?
Keypad mixed with the garage door Siri controls, and that's so that's pretty much what
we're just keypad entry. Now, I got to tell you, in Kansas, we were pretty safe, and I'm rural. It's hard to find. We don't have to lock our doors a lot, and I love living in a country where you can still do that. But I haven't carried a house key in 8 or 9 years. It's just not something that I think we have one around here somewhere for the house, but I have no idea where it is. When I sell the house, I'm going to have to do that. But for the truck,
always like we have to find one for like the dog sitter, and we're always rushing. Like, where the heck did it go? Yeah.
And now, even that, when we have people come over, and when we do lock the house, which is rare, we have the keypad entry has that, secondary code you can program for somebody. So the Lightning having that on the door, I use that all the time, especially since we have walkaway lock. And walkaway lock has gotten frustrating. I literally walk around the front of the truck before I even get to the front, and it's got it locked. Something has changed recently that
I haven't had any problems with it. But we're on 24, so it could be different.
Yeah, that might be a difference. For me, I'll be at work and I'm 30 feet away, but at home when I walk around the front, it's locking. And I know in Tesla software they have it where you can disable locking while you're at a location. So I'm gonna add that to my wish list of Ford stuff. Is don't lock it when I'm at this location. I don't want it locked at home.
See, I'm one of those. I lock it. Even like I've seen people suggest that too online. Like, oh well, Teslas, you can lock, and they're like, that's the way I love it. And I'm like, even if I had that option, it'd be locked in
you
my
wouldn't
garage.
use it. Yeah,
I
don't
care where I am. I'm locking it.
I don't lock my truck at work or at home. I do, or I'm sorry, but with walkaway lock, you can't. I'm not going to turn it on and off when I get to work or not. So it just locks all the time now.
Yeah,
and I'm not a fold mirror person because I don't want to wear the mirrors. I don't need to, but I do like the honk. I don't know why. I want it to tell me it's locked.
Yeah,
I wish the honk was a little less,
honky.
train horn and a little more just quick beep. But
it's a
kind of whoa, and they can tone that down, I'm sure. But anyway,
yeah.
So it is. Chris is going to be. He's going to be a little bit changed mindset going to pack if he does. We'll see how long he still carries that fob before he actually gets away from his old school thought of I have to have the fob in my pocket. Even me, when I first started having pack, I went 2 or 3 months with that fob in my pocket and phone as a key. And then I thought, why am I doing both? Just make the jump and go.
Yeah. No, I don't know. I started using it on the Mach-E, never had a problem. There was like one time where I think we had that bug in Justin's 22 Lightning, and I think we couldn't get the keyboard to pop up or the phone wasn't connecting. There used to be this weird error where like it would go between connecting and not connecting in the Bluetooth on the app, and you'd see it like go connecting, not connecting. It's like it would like freak out. And usually it solved itself in a few minutes. And there was one time it took like a couple extra minutes longer than we had wanted it to. And but we've never been stranded.
Speaking of that, you guys have 2 trucks, and so 2 Ford Pass apps. Probably both have trucks on both apps. We are a dual Ford EV family. If in the morning, one thing I've noticed, if I walk up to my Lightning and the door won't open, and I realized that I was in the Mach-E the night before and I'd used phone as a key in it, I can't just switch it over very quickly and it open. I find myself using the keypad to get in the truck, so I'm not standing outside like an idiot. And then once I'm in, I open the app and I watch that Bluetooth come up and it's grayed out and it sits there and it sits there and it sits there. And sometimes I either have to restart the truck or restart the phone to get it to kind of wake up. It happens about once a month for me where it won't connect unless you restart.
We used to have that a lot, but not much anymore at all. Like I do it all the time where I open I'm on Justin's truck. I'm like, oh crap. And so I switch it real quick. But when I switch it switches. I don't really I don't really have it grayed out.
The Mach-E it struggles. Maybe it's an internet connection thing where I'm at. Maybe I don't know. But they're Bluetooth.
Or maybe even Mach-E to Lightning is a little different than Lightning to you just never know the little.
Maybe that it doesn't want to let it go. And even I noticed in the app sometimes it will show that the app is now connected to the truck, but you look at your Bluetooth on your phone and it'll still say the Mach-E, like it hadn't fully switched, even though it's a weird, so I like it. I'm a phone as a key fan, but there are some quirks. I find that when I lay my hand on the door with my key fob in my pocket, it is immediate. With the phone as a key, it takes a second or so, before it click.
Yeah.
And I don't know,
I'd say it's a good one. Like 1 second. It depends on if and it all goes into that. Have you been loitering around it? Have you, did your welcome lighting turn on? Did you come at it from, really fast? Did you come at it? I think do you keep your, I know Justin sometimes a lot of time actually keeps his phone in his back pocket and the truck hates it. There's just not a fan. Yeah. It doesn't like it. Front pocket seems to be much more reliable and quicker. And it's more not necessarily even opening the doors, but particularly the frunk. I think it's because it's the furthest away from the antenna and, it's sitting in his back pocket.
I'm glad you brought that up because I think there was something in an update or somebody said something about that you're going to be able to open the frunk. I don't remember the situation, but you can't open the frunk if it's locked, obviously.
Yeah, there is the enhanced frunk OTA. I forget exactly, and that was actually the one that released Walkaway Lock as well. But it was inside of an enhanced frunk.
Better than now than it was before.
Yeah, I forget exactly what it was or what it does. But
I know half the time when I walk up to the truck, even if it's I'm sitting there. I've got the phone in my pocket. When I push the tailgate, it beeps at me 3 times, and I hit it again, and it opens. That happens almost every time. Did you experience that too?
Yes. I think there is a reason for that. I can't remember exactly what it is. I've heard why, but I can't remember exactly what the reason is. But yes, that does happen. But I don't let it beep 3 times. I just hit it twice. I just know it's going to do it. And so
I haven't tried that. I always push
it again and it'll open.
So next time I'll just try hitting it twice quickly. Yeah. Not a big deal, but it's one of those things you got to get used to if you're not like Chris's. I don't think that ever happens with the fob. I think it's a phone as a key thing. I could be wrong. It could be that it's a lock unlock thing.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I know they're funky. Like the motorized tailgates are a little more funky than the non-motorized anyways. Like there's just some little quirks that come to them. I don't know exactly
so ours
why.
Didn't work for like a year on the 23. That truck, the tailgate was thrown off of it when we got it. It's still got a couple of dings in it I haven't fixed. So what happened after going through FDRS and getting to the bottom of the diagnosis, we had one of the motors that actually went bad. I had to buy a new motor and install it. And they weren't terribly expensive. I mean, you'd think that would be $1,000 deal, but it's not. It was not seeing feedback. It has to see feedback. So the thing would go down slow, but you'd push the button and you'd hear it kind of try, and then it would just stop. It would never work. So I actually replaced both the motors just because I thought, well, the truck got the tailgate thrown completely off of it. I'm sure the other one's right behind it. So I did them both and everything worked fine after that. But I tell you, that feature of closing the tailgate with my knee or something is, man, I know the XLT has it power up and down, but I think it's an option.
Assist close. I don't think XLT has power up and down, but it does have the assist where you can just.
My XLT extended range has power.
Extended range. Yes.
Is that part of the package, or what is that?
Doesn't exist anymore. So
right.
But like I think. Yeah, I think they had it on there. That makes sense for the extended range because again, that was those little caveats that Chris and I had. I had the Blue Cruise and the pack standard range. He had the non. And that was another option. And
your truck was
those little things.
Like a hard loaded standard range. It had almost everything, right? Did you have sunroof?
No. So there was, but I had Blue Cruise and pack, but no sunroof, no heated seats in the back, no power to the steering wheel, no rain sensing wipers still. So really the only thing that my truck added over Chris's was Blue Cruise and pack, and that's it.
Okay. So for Chris, this is a big jump. For you really got rain sensing wipers, heated steering wheel, and that's first world problem I can't live without now. I love that thing.
I had heated steering wheel, but
you did have
but power steering wheel. Yeah,
power steering wheel. Yeah,
exactly.
I don't
but
use
my
that.
pedals, but that's funny because like the pedals were power, but the steering wheel was like, it's just funny what they decided to take away. And the rain sensing wipers, like everything was there, just needed a $30 sensor.
That's kind of explainable. The power pedals is to be able to get it. You have to adjust those now to get people meet that standard, and it can be adjusted manually on the steering wheel or not. It doesn't have to be. I don't adjust my steering wheel. Once I'm set, it's there. Now, when my wife drives the truck and she uses her pack or her fob, it'll adjust for her to her setting, but I don't have it sitting there moving in and out. I don't want it to do that every time.
For me and my person, I don't either, but it was nice, Justin being 6'5.5" and me being 5'11", that if I were to drive his truck or he were to drive mine, he did have to adjust my wheel, and where I could hop in his standard range, and it would just, it was nice. So but I agree. But for myself, once you put it in the place that you're never touching it again. So there were little things, but I love that standard range for that reason. I got used to not having the sunroof, and not rattling and not leaking and all those things that come along with the sunroof.
Boy, it makes weird noises. There's a couple of little black trim accordion looking pieces at the front on either side.
Those will pop right off.
Man, I was going down the road. I'm a guy that I'm a snake freak. I don't like snakes and all this. And that thing fell out and landed on my ear and my shoulder one day. And I don't know why, but my first I got a snake falling on me, and I freaked out. I'm driving down the road, and it was that stupid thing just fell off, and it just slipped on there. But man, I tell you that. But those are little things about the sunroof that just you hear these pops in the sun and the cold, you hear them creaking
flexes and and it's nice to have. I do like having it. I like that it has a full shade. You know, that's huge.
I will say, getting in the Tesla and the Chevy Silverado, if I don't think I could handle it. The Mach-E doesn't have it. We bought one of those as well. We bought one of those aftermarket shades to put in there for the summer because it's so hot. That is the
Mach-E. I thought they did a decent job with the tint. I've seen worse. You know, I've seen better, but those oleoscopic ones are really cool that you can, Audi and Rivian has them now. Those are super cool, but I've still heard people even say that those are warm comparative to, the full shade, power shade that Ford has.
Right. I love the power shade. That's one of my favorite features. I'm gonna venture out on another thing that I do is I'm gonna try to tint my own this Model S that we bought. It's not tinted. The roof's tinted. I think they all are, but the rest of the windows are not. And I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it myself. Cool. I actually got a really good quote from my guy, $350 to do it, and that was with not carbon, that was ceramic, which
nice,
good price. There's some ceramic kits out there for $70 to $100, and I just because I like to do things myself, I'm going to jump in.
Sure,
I'm going to try to tint this. So if it's
just
not
like
hard,
a decal.
And they come pre-cut and they're pretty close. The XLT that we have, it doesn't have front tinted. None of the Lightnings have front tinted windows, and I like them to match. And they're that 35% or 30% will get it to match. I'm going to do those myself if I can. It's not much different than doing stripes, and I've done decals or stripes a lot. So we'll see how the tint situation goes. But I remember back in the day in high school, you get that tint and then it turns purple and you can't see through it.
Yeah, it was terrible. No, it was so bad.
Yeah.
No, not anymore. People are saying, I hear people say the same thing, like, I would never do tint. It gets so nasty. I'm like, go get good ceramic tint.
And I'm running carbon
as long as you want it.
I've got carbon in my truck, and I've had it in there. The last one for 60,000 miles in the sun. It never moved. It never bubbled.
Yeah.
I think the carbon is way better than it used to be.
Yeah.
But the ceramic is even better. So.
Yep. No, there's no doubt. We do 20 in ours, but we don't touch anything else. We do 20 on the fronts and just leave it. And the light bleed from the windshield and then now to the sunroof puts it just about right. And we could do darker, but it's illegal here. So we want to try to keep it as match as possible, close as possible, dark as possible, but also like not get arrested. So it's a lot of layers we're trying to cover.
Well, the whole tint thing, I actually had to Google that to find out there's different states and different percentages. Some states they don't let you over like 37 or 40%, and some go down to like 25 to 30 based on the heat where you're at.
Yep. Ohio's at 35.
Yeah,
we do 20s.
I think it's Kansas as well at 35, which is we're hot here. I mean, it'd be nice to be in the 20 to 25, and I know it's an officer safety thing, but from an interior temp thing, I would rather have it quite a bit darker. Now I hate it at night trying to hook up trailers and back in some places. I always find myself rolling the window down. So
I know that is, I completely agree. It is kind of, I did my Bronco, I think at like 15. That was the darkest I've ever gone. And there were times where I'm like, it's just too dark. I'm even especially at night driving, even not towing, but just driving, I can't see.
People tint that front window. My Can-Am side-by-side, the Defender, is full glass, and I tinted the entire thing with 20, the front glass too. And I'm telling you, at night, we put BeamTech lights and a big light bar. It looks like they're not on, and then you reach up and tilt that window out, and the world is just on fire. It's so lit up. But that front tint, we take it to Colorado. My thought was, in the summer, it'll cut the heat down, and it does. But it takes away from the experience, especially when you're riding a side-by-side through Colorado. It takes away from that experience of where you're at. So I find myself leaving the window open because we want to see the world. And that's going to be the next thing is if that engine ever goes out of that, I want to hear and see the world when I'm in Colorado. It's such an experience. So when I say when the engine goes out, I want to swap that over to an EV. We haven't seen a lot of movement in the EV world in side-by-sides. Lawnmowers are starting to gain a lot of momentum, but not in the side-by-side world. There's the Polaris Kinetic, and Polaris really in the mainstream one is the only one. Now, Can-Am bought a motorcycle company and they build a electric motorcycle now. So I think we're going to see it, but I think they're all kind of sitting back watching what happens with Polaris on this Kinetic, and it's not taken off, and it's $34,000 for a non-cab machine. You know, you can buy a fully loaded 4-door Defender cab machine for that.
Yeah.
And so
my parents have a Yamaha. It's nice. It's but yeah, I mean it's I will say it's very loud and it doesn't
they all are
very, I mean it's just loud. It would be nice to have, but
an EV would be a game changer on that. Something with some, and they built one. There's Diesel Dave rode one that a guy built that was a single seat Polaris RZR that was a Tesla Model 3 swap, and man, it looks like a ball of fun to me. And I think there's so much power. And I've looked at this about 10 times. The problem is the range. If I'm going to Colorado, we're running 90 miles a day through the Alpine Loop and through those ranges, and you got to have the range. You know, so I think that's why Boat Electric hasn't taken off yet either, because the range is you'd have to carry so much battery right now,
and the charging too, the lack of infrastructure. I mean, I think there's I mean you could go, if you're keeping it at a marina and you could shore power, that makes sense. But if you're wanting to go further and you want a trailer, and for us, I mean, we'd be towing around a real heavy boat.
Oh yeah.
For
me, the side by side works if I can get 100 110 miles, because I can charge it off of the truck. I can charge it. There's actually chargers in Lake City, Colorado, where we go. There's chargers. There's 2 or 3 of them in the town. There's a fast charger and a couple slows. But even in off the truck would be great, because I can use the truck all week and then we charge it before we leave. But yeah, anyway, we're getting off base here. I just
real quick to go to Kurt's question here. I don't want to skip over that. So I think technically when I got our F-150s, when they measured the tint, I think it's technically right between 20% and like 30-35%. I think they measure at like 24, 20. Yeah, it's like, and it depends. They'll get little like variations in the readings, but yeah, it's like right in between the two. So we've kind of done it both ways. We've satisfied. I think the Mach-E was exactly the same, and we did 35 on that, 35%, and it was a little light. It was very, very close, but it was a little light. Especially with the windshield light leak, and then if you have the sunroof on top of it. That's why we do 20s on our F-150, because of that. It's still even a little light in certain areas and certain lights, I should say. But I think 20 ceramic is the closest match that we have found if you don't touch anything else.
Yeah, but that's what I did.
Carbon and ceramic also have a little bit different shading. So in different products literally are a little bit different. So some go like a little bit, like sway a little purple, some sway a little green, like there's a little difference. So I would just check with your shop what they use, what product they use. In my opinion, 20% ceramic is the closest. Ceramic tends to be a little bit darker and blacker than like purpler, and that matches, in my opinion, the OEM tint on the back. If you're really picky, you could go all the way around and like try to match it the best if you want, but I don't think you need to do
I think we did 25% carbon on the front, and they're really close. If you really are picky and your OCD kicks in, you're going to notice it, but it's enough. I don't want my front windows so dark I can't see out of them at night. Like trying to turn an intersection and you don't know where the curb is if you're in a strange area. I find myself rolling down the window just to make sure.
I said, I did 15 on my Bronco and it was too dark. 20 is the absolute darkest I would go. If you want a little lighter and try to remain, legal, because each state's different too. I don't know, it depends on your state, but Ohio's 35. So, but I mean, the bottom line is they're going to measure it
already, though. I mean, that front window is not completely clear. They have the UV coating. So if you do a 25 to 30, you're going to be a little lighter, but it'll be close. Like you said, 20 in ceramic is pretty good.
And it depends on what they use. I've seen, because some ceramics go like 20, 35, some have 20, 30, some, like you said, some have 25, 20 and 30. So it really just depends on like what product, and I call around too, because I've seen some crazy price variations on those. Like it's crazy. So I would just call and just make sure you're getting, but don't go too, look at the reviews and stuff.
Well, that's the thing. We've got a mobile guy down in our local town, 40 miles from here, that comes to you, and he's just a guy that does it. He's got a little old van and he works out of it. I got a quote on the Tesla Model 3 that was $600 for my daughter, and he did it for like $275. And it was carbon, and she didn't care because we knew we were going to keep the car forever. Ceramic was another $150. It wasn't much more, I told her I tried to sell it, but again, $275 for a 19-year-old that she was like, yep, I want that. So he does the lightning front windows on ours for $50 a side.
Yeah.
Awesome. In carbon. And I'm like, I can't do that for that. I'm not going to mess it. If I mess it up one time, but
our guy is $199 for ceramic for both front windows done.
That's not bad.
Which is not bad. He does a great job compared to I've paid 5 years ago even more for a guy that didn't even didn't match. Yeah. He didn't. I think they only had like 30 and 27, and I was like, it didn't match. Yeah, this guy's $199, so that's what we pay for ceramic for both fronts, and he does a great job. So if you can get around there, I'd say that's a good price. $250, $300 is approaching a little high, but like you said, I mean, I've seen people quote even higher than that, 500 or so. So yeah. Well, should we call it a night? And
I'd say we're right at 2 hours, and I know Chris is going to be back on the road soon, and he's hoping to kind of follow up on where he's at. He's driving from he's in Little Rock, Arkansas right now. He's headed back to California. He's going to be at my place either tonight or first thing in the morning. We're gonna do that. A little bit of probably some filming at the shop. I know he's wanting to see it, and then I think he's headed to Colorado. I think he's maybe going to see Kyle Connor, Benjamin Westy, some stops. It'll be really cool to see those things.
The difference is, so when we say ceramic, there's a ceramic coating, and then there's a ceramic material that they make tint out of. So they're both a film. Ceramic coating is a totally different thing. I understand your confusion though. I get the confusion. Carbon and ceramic are just two different styles or materials that they use for tint. Ceramic is the latest and the greatest. Carbon's kind of like the older technology. You can get it done for cheaper because the film costs a little bit less and a little easier to apply. But they're both
in your truck. Go for the ceramic. If you're not and you don't care, and if it lasts 5 years and you're good with it, carbon.
I think they'll tell you to at the ask your shop. Like I think again, it depends on what brands they use, but I think the shops that I always talk to said ceramic is a little bit better with the heat.
It is.
Rejection. So
if you're in Texas, you get a 3M ceramic or something equivalent. 3M's not the only one out there that's good. So
definitely.
All right. Well, sounds good. I think we're going to call it a night. Thanks everybody for joining, and we will be back next week and hopefully get an update for Chris after he makes the long trek back home.
I cannot wait to hear. I'm so
excited.
He's
so excited.
I wish we could have got him on real quick tonight, but I know he's busy. He's chatting. He's getting his stuff done. So we'll catch up with him next week.
So we had almost 80 people tonight. Everybody that stayed with us and joined, I appreciate it. We will talk to you guys next week.
Thanks, guys.